Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. Welcome, Conscious Warriors, to today's episode, Learning How to Love Myself. Now, I'm really grateful for you being here and tuning in. If you're here for the first time, Conscious Warriors go about their lives one step at a time and do it to lead purpose-driven lives, so that everything that we've gone through, everything we're going through, and everything that we will encounter in life, we're able to always take the next one step. And we do it consciously because we want to learn about what's happening for us externally, internally, and so much more. Now, this morning is a really special episode because I've been asked by one of our family members to do a couple of videos, one on learning how to love ourselves externally, how do we go about it, and learning how to love ourselves internally, how do we go about it. And whilst it's a process, it is a process that we can put in order. For those that are interested in not only the notes but also how to bring the process into day-to-day life, I've actually made a little workbook for you, and it's free and it's now available in the Academy. I've already put it in there for you, and I'll just put the link up so that you can see it in the comments, and you can look in there. And the actual one you need, because there's lots in there, is called Learning How to Love Myself. Now, you won't see the front cover straight away, but I can show you the front cover of the workbook. Okay? So it's getting back to having that joy in our life instead of all the negative things that we find ourselves saying. So how do I know that I need to learn to love myself? Then we need to be able to be willing to start listening to everything we think about ourselves, what we say about ourselves to other people, how we feel about ourselves when we're out in the world and communicating with other people. What are the words I'm saying to myself? Do I say things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm ugly, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, all of that kind of thing that is really negative and puts you down. And usually it starts off with the most powerful words that we ever say, I am. So what do we do when we realise that we're saying a lot of this out into the world and we want to change that up? So we know it's not healthy. We now understand that the circumstances in our day-to-day life could have brought this about. And for teenagers, it's definitely an area that's got to be examined, because you're at a stage where in your day-to-day life, you're experimenting with lots of different ideas of who am I as part of this world. And the truth is that it's a process of discovery, but the one thing you don't want to do is put yourself in a situation where for years you're saying these things about yourself and they're just not true. So I remember when I was a teenager in high school and I was just going about my day-to-day life. I didn't necessarily have any idea about whether I was too fat or too thin or anything. And one of my girlfriends said to me one day, oh, I'm just too fat. And I looked at her and I thought, I've never ever seen you as fat at all. Like, she just wasn't that way at all. She was the normal weight for height. We were all tall girls. But from that point in time, I began to think, oh, well then if she thinks she's too fat, then I must be too fat as well. And it's been a mental struggle for a very long time. Now, and then apart from the fact that with a medical misdiagnosis and over-medication, I did become even larger than I am today, it was like, oh my goodness, it's like everything I've ever thought came true. So we don't want that to happen. We want to be willing to have a heart attitude of seeing what I'm speaking out into the world, what I'm saying to others about myself, and saying, well, if others want to say that about them, that's okay. But I want to be conscious of changing up my day-to-day life. Now, in the booklet, I've given you a whole step-by-step process of how this inner voice becomes formed, but we won't go through all those steps because doing it in live video is pretty boring. What we want to do is give you on the video some quick tips about how to begin to turn that around. Now, why do we want to turn it around? Well, we have around 70,000 thoughts a day. And so when we're only conscious of the ones that we're telling other people, this is who I am, this is what I'm like. And remember, if we're saying this constantly, that's how other people are going to look at us. And they're going to question, well, no, you're not really, but, I can see that you're struggling with this. So we want to be able to turn it around. Now, turning it around means that we're not going to focus on the problem, because as humans and with our brain, when we focus on the problem of I'm saying this about myself and giving myself a hard time about saying this about myself, then that problem just becomes bigger, because our mind is so amazing. It magnifies everything that we focus on. So in order to turn this external dialogue around in thoughts and emotions around, we want to be able to change our focus. So the first thing is we want to learn to say to ourselves, stop, okay? I don't need to go down this road. That's not who I am. And if I'm looking at social media and I'm comparing myself to that, then I need to reinforce to myself that's not real life, okay? And I want to live in the here and now in my life, and I want to change things up to improve my future as well as today. Now, no one can tell you to do this. It's a conscious choice to change things around. So in the booklet as well is all these self-reflections, questions to ask you questions so that you can begin to identify what's happening for you. I actually just picked up the wrong page. So let me pick up the right page and teach you what we're going to look at to develop a healthy ego, because that's what we need. It's actually a normal thing to feel good about ourselves. So when we're babies, we're born with either a positive outlook, okay, or a neutral outlook. So if we develop a negative outlook, it's something that came about in our day-to-day life. It's not something that we were born with, okay? Now, obviously, I must be one of those people that were born with a positive outlook, because that's where I always lean towards, even though I've been through the darkest of dark times, all right? I still come through that because I have a bent towards being more positive or working out solution-focused, how I can change things. So what do we want to start to do to develop a healthy ego? And the other reason that this is absolutely essential for us as well is because part of our brain is, it's like having an app that needs to be switched on and developed. Okay, we've got to develop this sense of self app that we can have our brain going back to and saying, well, no, that's not you. So we want to develop our healthy ego, and we want to develop our sense of self app in our brain so that our whole brain functions effectively. Okay, so we want to be able to really become aware at the end of the day. What were my spoken words? What were my thoughts, feelings? How did I put energy into motion into the negative aspects of my day? All right. Now, they may not have been all day. They may have only been part of day, but that's that one part that for this self-reflection exercise, we need to be honest and look at, because it will become bigger and bigger and bigger and take more time to break it down. So we want to recognize when we've got inflexible thinking. So if you're stuck in this state of being down on yourself and saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not beautiful, and I'm not, comparing myself to somebody else, and I'm not X, Y, and Z, then we want to call that inflexible thinking, because A, we need to be the ones that change it around, and B, when we recognize we've got inflexible thinking, it helps us go, whoa, I don't want to be cast in that mold for the rest of my life. And I do understand that this is a challenge at a heart level to change things around. So we want to recognize our negative perspective, our self-rejecting perfectionism, and or obsessing about danger and catastrophizing. So any one of those things, and especially the self-rejecting one, we want to sit down and ask some key questions about that. All the questions are in the ebook, by the way. And if we look at the self-rejecting, we want to ask ourselves a really, really intelligent question and say, hey, why am I rejecting myself? I've got to live with myself for the rest of my life. So continually rejecting myself doesn't make sense to do. I can keep doing it, or when I'm willing to, I can change it around. Okay, and we want to recognize the times when we abandon ourselves. So we don't support ourselves and don't take our own side. When I first read this, I was like, oh my goodness, I go through life and I'm not batting for myself. I'm not believing in myself that I have the capability to learn whatever is needed to learn to go to bat for myself. That's the bottom line. It's to stand up and say, hey, I can learn how to manage whatever it is in my life that I'm avoiding and I don't feel safe about. I can learn how to manage it, and I can learn how to grow through it. So I'm going to go into bat for me, and I'm going to bat that I'm going to get up and hit a home run. Okay? So I'm going to conquer this external lack of love of myself. All right? And I'm going to call me out when I'm doing this. I mean, the person who's going to be the most truthful with myself is me. Okay? And I need to be willing to call myself out and say, hey, that really sucks how I talk about me, and I don't want to do that anymore. All right? So go to bat for yourself. Pick it up and say, damn it, I'm going to hit a home run, and whatever it takes for me to reflect on what I'm doing, I'll do it. And I'm going to say, this stops here. This stops with me. And we can do that successfully. Okay, we want to learn how to connect and communicate with other significant adults. Now, everyone in their life needs a coach in some way, shape or form. It keeps us accountable and keeps us on track. So if you're a teenager, it could be a student, not a student, could be an older student. It could be a teacher that is prepared to walk through you with this process. So they won't tell you how to be. They'll help you and encourage you and say, what if you thought about it this way? They're the safe people that we can learn to trust. It could be a pastor at a church that you know that you're safe and they're encouraging and the church grows. It could be a community centre, a community group that you go to. It could be, oh look, if you get online these days and look up meetups, it's a worldwide platform where people put up meetup groups where you can go to with people with the same likes, same passions, same, for people who like to craft. There's craft groups, there's reading groups, there's walking groups, there's parent groups, and there's probably teenage groups. I haven't looked for teenage groups. I'm just a bit out of that category these days. But if we're willing to look and take the negative shade off our eyes, we will find a group of people that we can go and be amongst and start to get our life on track, start to build dreams and take the one next step towards them. We want to get into a space where we can become our authentic self. Now, current phraseology is live my best life. If you're a teenager, living your best life does not mean that you've achieved your dreams. It means we're working towards our dreams. If you're an adult, you still could be working towards your dreams. I am. And it's a good, healthy place to be, okay? But I'm authentic about what that means for me in my day-to-day life. So being authentic about it means I know who I am, what I'm capable of. I understand the areas that I need to examine and change, and I have a coach that can help me identify where I need to do that as well, because we don't see all of ourselves. It's either 10% or 20% of ourselves that we don't need. So we need input from people who are willing to give us safe and manageable input as well. And yeah, not every day is going to be, rainbows and unicorns, okay? But every day can be a day that I'll look back and reflect on and say, hey, I can recognize that, and that's my next one step to take to grow, okay? We want to manage our internal dialogue. So instead of letting our thoughts run away like one of those powerful European trains that take off and they fly. Oh my goodness, the first time I went on one, it was like, wow, this is magic. They go so fast and so smooth. So we want to say, right, I want to get hold of my inner dialogue and stop it jumping out into the world and saying things about me that aren't true. I'm in charge of that. I get to say what I need to say about myself. Nobody else gets to dictate that, okay? And we want to continually reduce our identification with that inner critic. So we want to cut down our need to identify with negativity, all right? And we do that in our day-to-day life. It takes a lot of courage, actually, to start saying, I no longer want to identify with the negative things I say about myself. And often that means having other adults around us who keep us accountable and say, hey, are you still going down that track or not? Fiona, I love the rainbows and unicorns. And, be willing to have that accountability, okay? Now, as I said, the booklet that comes with this, link up there, and if you're on YouTube, the link will be in the comments. So I give you all the questions to reflect on at the end of each day. So if you've got courage and want to spend 5 really healthy minutes on yourself to change your external dialogue so that you start to put into a practice of learning to love yourself, we have 8 questions for self-reflection, which will take you 5 minutes minimum. After that, you don't have to be there, but you want to do the self-reflection because no one else can change this up but you, okay? There's note paper in the workbook as well, so you can write down all your reflections, and it's good to write them down because we can go back and reflect and see how far we've grown. So one of the things I do yearly is a Facebook post on my personal page, and I get raw and real about what the last year has brought forward for me, how I've grown in that year, because I do keep journal entries most of the year as well. I used to do it literally every night, but now that I've developed a level of self-awareness, I do the journaling as I go through changes now. Okay, so I hope you've learned how to begin to learn to love yourself externally, and tomorrow's video will be about how to learn to love yourself internally. And remember, the ebook gives you all of how this dialogue, negative dialogue, became formed. Okay, thanks for joining in today. Thanks for coming along, girls. If you're here for the replay, do a hashtag replay. If you'd like to know when I go live, hit like the page and subscribe on YouTube, and then you will know when the latest video is released. And I will see you all tomorrow morning. I'm really looking forward to it. Bye for now.